Welcome back to the deep dive. We're here again to take your sources and really pull out the most important bits of knowledge and insight. And today we're getting into something really personal, something universal, relationships. We've got this fascinating book in front of us, and it asks a pretty gold question. Do the men make the rules and the women keep them? It's actually, interestingly, a book written with film and internet television in mind. So it's got that kind of narrative feel. We're going to take a hard look at how we connect, how roles change, and, what equality and fulfillment really mean in partnerships today.
Exactly. And it's not just a read through, is it? It's meant to be like a starting point for thinking more deeply. It uses the author's own reflections and some pretty powerful real world learning to look at love, marriage, cohabitation, all those shifting landscapes.
So yeah, get ready. We'll be exploring the author's own search for, a cultural definition of identity. We'll look at the dynamics, sometimes funny, sometimes tough, between men, women, and, well, all people in relationships. How do the old traditional views stack up against modern life? And why is understanding all this evolution so key for, navigating your own relationships? Okay, let's unpack this first bit. The author kicks things off with a statement that might make some people pause. Relationships are contracts and operate like a business. That sounds maybe a bit cold for love, doesn't it? How does the book square that?
Well, I think it's deliberate. It sets up this very practical view, almost like a negotiation, right? She talks about finding your least and most supportable positions, basically, your non-negotiables and where you can give a little, your standards, your expectations. And what's interesting is she admits her own traditional leanings, believing courtship, parents caring for kids, but she's unmarried herself, still looking for that permanent resident, that co-pilot friend and partner forward. So there's that tension right there.
Right. And she really points out how much technology has changed things, going from family introductions to just a swipe left on any dating application. Wow. And she asks, take away the tech. How long can that relationship sustain engagements? Makes you think.
Definitely. And this search for understanding, for some kind of cultural definition, that's really central for her. She's asking these big questions. Is it all about self-destiny? Or are we supposed to follow these cultural rules? This search for truth, for veritas, as she calls it, apparently started way back in her youth. Reading the Thornbirds apparently really shook up her ideas about Christianity and kind of set her off on this path, trying to bridge faith, state, and, well, intelligence in a broader sense, an integration of things.
Okay, and this next part gets really interesting. Directly tackling gender roles. How have those historical rules for men and women shaped things, and what's actually changing now?
Oh, historically, they were incredibly rigid. Marriages were often less about love and more like strategic alliances for money, for status, keeping the family line going. Masculinity meant, strength, dominance, being assertive. Femininity was being nurturing, emotional, passive. But the key thing the book stresses is that these are socially constructed. They aren't just biologically fixed. And knowing that gives us the power to maybe redefine them ourselves, doesn't it? To build something more authentic.
Yeah, I thought that bit about pink and blue was fascinating, how even colors got tied up in gender stereotypes from when we're kids. But the book also really emphasizes the shift happening now, people challenging those norms, exploring gender fluidity, self-expression.
Absolutely. And things like feminist movements, women gaining financial independence, that's completely changed the game for rulemaking and relationships. The author actually notes that in the pursuit of equality in the Western world, we have become desensitized to embracing femininity and, in many ways, adopted behaviors typically associated with men, which
Yeah.
is a really interesting observation to wrestle with. How do we balance that?
It made me think of those stories she included, couples like Sarah and David, Amina and John, Jamie and Alex, people who are actively figuring out roles differently, challenging the old ways. It just shows that this rulemaking thing is, well, it's alive, it's evolving, we're all part of it.
So moving on from definitions, the book gets into how real-world learning shapes us in relationships, especially under stress or when we have to adapt. And there's this surprising comparison to plant biology. Yeah, that was a really unique part. It talks about cannabis plants, how female ones can actually become hermaphroditic or even male if they're under serious stress. And it uses that as a metaphor for how humans might adapt their gender expression or behavior when facing, social or psychological pressure. It's a powerful way to think about how flexible identity can be, right? Like how our environment shapes us.
And that IKEA example she uses kind of builds on that, showing how controlled settings influence behavior, the importance of supportive surroundings. Then her own story, after that bad ATV accident,
Hmm.
that really drives it home. Facing huge physical, emotional challenges, losing assets, having to move. She started researching cannabis seeds, learning about stress and nature, and found resilience through that. That's some deep, real-world learning right there.
And her point about her father's disapproval of past boyfriends, leading her to vow not to bring anyone home unless it was serious, like engagement serious. That really hits home as a real-world example of setting boundaries, protecting your self-respect based on past hurts. It shapes how she approaches dating now.
Okay, so switching gears a bit. Let's talk practicalities. Money. The law. These often feel like the less romantic, but maybe more crucial parts. How does the book suggest navigating these sort of contractual elements?
Well, it definitely emphasizes talking about money openly, acknowledging you might have different approaches, one's a saver, one's a spender, perhaps. And the author, having built her own business aiming for generational wealth, she really pushes for mutual respect and equality. She says her voice is one-to-one with a man's, not two to the equivalent of one. It's about partnership, not hierarchy.
Yeah, and the way she talks about dating, marriage, cohabitation, it's quite nuanced. She brings up prenups even when things are good, when love and goodwill are strong, and even says, sometimes divorce is a good thing. That's pretty direct.
It is. And that ties into the legal frameworks, which is a big part of how the state shapes our relationships. The book looks at common law versus formal marriage, the rights and responsibilities involved. It mentions the evolution of same-sex marriage laws, like Canada making it legal back in 2005, pushed by their Charter of Rights. Also nods to figures like Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Canada's famous 5 women who fought just to be legally recognized as persons in 1929. You see how these legal definitions have changed and are still changing, challenging old power dynamics. It paves the way for more equal partnerships for everyone.
And then there's this concept of veritas again, the Roman goddess of truth, right? But the author takes it further. She developed her own theory, veritas. Vibration, energy, reading, intuition, truths, accurate sensor. That's intriguing. How does that connect to relationships?
She presents it as more than just an idea. It's like an intuitive sense, she believes. Something you feel maybe in your solar plexus that helps you discern your own truth in a situation, in a relationship. It's about tapping into that inner gut feeling to guide your path and maybe advocate for what's right for you and your partner, an energetic intuition.
Okay, we can't really have this deep dive without touching on faith and state. That complex relationship and how it impacts personal identity and our partnerships. The author goes there too.
Oh, definitely. She talks about her own background, really diverse influences, Christian, Catholic, atheist, scientific,
Yeah.
and mentions her rocky relations with the church, feeling there was hypocrisy, questioning things like equality within the church, requirements for getting into paradise. She's looking for something more inclusive.
And she recounts that moment dealing with Catholic rules about cohabitation and divorce, feeling trapped as an independent woman, famously declaring, "Sacre bleu, I curse the tabernacle and every saint in the heavens." You can really feel her frustration there, trying to align her life with doctrine.
Yeah, quite the image. But, she approaches it respectfully overall. She recognizes faith's importance, but insists on personal autonomy. So, she developed her own strategies for making cohabitation work. Practical stuff, open communication, smart money planning, like separate and joint account shared goals. Basically, rejecting old expectations to build something that felt authentic and fair to her.
And that story about her asking in a Middle Eastern Muslim community, can I have 4 husbands? That wasn't just being provocative, was it? It was, as she puts it, a cultural critique and a personal exploration.
Yeah.
Really pushing against gender imbalances and rules like polygamy, part of that quest for equality. So the book really does take that promised hard look at relationships. It covers seduction, but also humor, and importantly, the darker stuff too.
Right. Seduction isn't just about looks, in her view. It's an art form. It involves building rapport, reading body language, having a bit of mystery, using humor, confidence, timing. It's about genuine connection, not just playing games.
And she has some fun with it too, talking about love through a liquor bottle, beer goggles effect, how lines get blurry between real attraction and just intoxication, especially, she says, at 2 a.m. when no one is ugly.
Yeah. But then it contrasts those old school values, like commitment being this unbreakable thing, with newer ideas focused on happiness, self-fulfillment. She even uses penguins as this cute example of nature's ambassadors of commitment. Yeah. But then quickly pivots to stressing the importance of spotting red flags, dishonesty, gaslighting, when the effort isn't equal, because true love does not diminish It empowers. That's a key takeaway.
And it doesn't shy away from the really toxic stuff.
Yeah.
Abuse, manipulation, sexual harassment, undermining, jealousy. It outlines the damage these things do and even profiles the kinds of people who perpetuate them, underscoring that self-respect is both a shield and a guide, which feels incredibly important.
So pulling all these different threads together, what's the big picture for building connections that actually last? The book frames it as a constant negotiation process, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. It's about developing skills, active listening, communicating effectively, having emotional intelligence, being creative when problems come up, and compromise. It's not about just giving in. It's finding that sweet spot, as she calls it. Like her example of finding a beach in the mountains for a vacation, finding something that works for both people's needs. It's creative collaboration.
And I loved the description of going from single life to a committed relationship as this deep dive into growth, compromise, and quite honestly, a bit of chaos, complete with the late night laundry sessions and those passive aggressive laundry basket moments. I think we can all relate to that real life messiness.
Totally.
Yeah.
And she emphasizes that being ready for commitment means having emotional maturity, being willing to compromise, being brave enough to be vulnerable. Ultimately, the message seems to be relationships are really what you make of them. You've got agency here.
And that journey, maybe from what she terms loveless love towards finding something new or just accepting things, it takes work. Intentional effort, open talk, maybe getting professional help sometimes. It reminds you that love isn't static, is it? It changes, adapts, maybe even surprises you.
Wow. Okay, that was quite the journey through this evolving world of relationships. From that big question about equality and the author's own search for cultural definition, to the nitty-gritty of money talks, real-world learning, personal growth, the dynamics between male, female, all people. It's a lot.
It really is. And we've seen how dynamic relationships are, haven't we? Moving from tradition towards more modern forms. The book uses humor, but also tackles tough things like faith and state. It really shows how our identities, our values, how we date, marry, cohabitate, it's all constantly shifting. It requires that ongoing negotiation you mentioned. And that central question from the title, do the men make the rules and the women keep them? The book's answer at the end feels quite powerful. It suggests that real power, well, it does not reside in the hands of one person alone. It resides in mutual respect and shared authority. It resides in the balance.
Well said. Ultimately, she suggests the heart leads true north. Relationships boil down to that negotiation. How people meet each other with openness, with respect, whether you're meeting square on, agreeing directly, or squaring up to face an issue, or even sometimes squaring off when you really have to defend a boundary. It's about navigating all of that.
So here's our final thought for you, our listener, to chew on. In this changing landscape, how will you define and maybe redefine your own relationship rules? Embrace the messiness, celebrate the good stuff, and keep figuring out love on your own terms. And remember, this guide we've been discussing is out there as a book designed for film and TV too, so there's even more depth to potentially explore.